Tonight, the Cook Report unveils the evidence that stopped a murder trial. We uncover new facts following the tragic deaths of two young mothers. Both were married to this man. He's Kevin Todd Sweeney. Sweeney is a liar and a con man. Now a new trial must decide whether he's also a lady killer. Yesterday morning, outside a high court in the Netherlands, Kevin Sweeney on his way to trial for the murder of his wife, Suzanne Davis. But in a dramatic development, the trial was later postponed because the prosecution has vital new evidence, evidence uncovered by a Cook Report investigation. Our investigation began deep in the Belgian countryside. This is home to a man who's led a mysterious life, using false names and phony companies. He's claimed life insurance approaching £1 million. Tonight we investigate the sudden deaths of two of Kevin Sweeney's wives. This is Kevin Sweeney and his first English wife, Beverly Flint. She was the mother of two young children. Beverly was 33 when she suddenly dropped dead.
She was perfectly normal. You know, there was no sign of anything was wrong with her at all.
We reveal new evidence that Kevin Sweeney was involved in forging his wife's will. In a small village in Oxfordshire, the parents of Suzanne Davis remember the daughter they also tragically lost.
She just got her whole life together and she was just so thrilled to be pregnant. She'd never thought she could have babies, and once her daughter was born, she was just the most wonderful mother.
Suzanne Davis was a single parent who answered Kevin Sweeney's Lonely Hearts ad for a new wife to replace the late Beverly Flint. A young woman who'd overcome anorexia, desperate to find happiness and security for her young child. 18 months later, she too was dead.
He's Walter Mitty. There is no basis to anything he tells you. It's all untrue. And Suzanne believed it, and Beverly believed it. They both died believing these lies.
Kevin Sweeney has claimed to be the son of a French aristocrat. In fact, his father was a railway engineer and he was born in India. But for Kevin Sweeney, tall stories are a way of life.
He told me that he was born in Paris, but he also, on another occasion, told me that he had been born in Tunbridge Wells.
He ranged from working with the World Bank to intelligence agencies to having a crack at, like, formula driving.
He said he went to Harvard Business School when he was 17. He said that he had worked for the Paris Bank, the World Bank. He said he'd raced for McLaren.
He was a very kind of upmarket, jet-setting sort of chap who had done all these fantastic things.
Sweeney apparently earns his money selling market research to companies all over the world. He's moved from country to country, setting up and closing down dozens of businesses. He claims to employ 180 people in the United States, but police believe some of the companies exist only on paper, run by untraceable directors who are, in fact, aliases for Mr. Sweeney.
I think that he used the alias Hendrik Pold, and I think that he used the alias Fred Kirk because he had that signature stamp. But it was a feeling that it was him. The facade was always there that it wasn't him.
Kevin Sweeney has already been on trial once before for the murder of Suzanne Davis. Last October, a Dutch court found him not guilty. But under the Dutch system, the prosecution can, and in this case did, appeal if it thinks it should have secured a conviction. However, we've discovered the Dutch police still haven't uncovered vital evidence. On a Saturday afternoon in July 1995, Kevin Sweeney travelled from his home in Belgium to the Dutch village of Steensel, where he and Suzanne Davis had just bought a second house, apparently as a base for a new business. Sophisticated burglar alarms recorded that he spent almost 3 hours there. Dutch police believe he was making the final preparations for arson and murder. Questioned later by police, Sweeney insisted his visit was innocent to set up computers for the new business.
I sat down downstairs on the sofa for a little while.
Ik heb een tijdje beneden op de bank gezeten.
I think I dropped off for a few minutes.
Ik ben een paar minuten weggedoezeld.
And then I went back to the office and continued what I was trying to do.
That Saturday night, Sweeney turned up late to meet his wife in Amsterdam. She thought he'd been on a business trip to Germany. They then went out on the town. Sweeney had introduced Suzanne to some of Amsterdam's more exotic attractions. The self-styled millionaire and his wife spent the remains of Saturday night in Amsterdam. The following day, they drove to their new house in Steensel to spend their first ever night there. But around 2 in the morning, Sweeney says he decided to go back to the children in Belgium. Bizarrely, he claims he left Suzanne doing housework in the nude.
Suzanne was a very special person, and she liked to do things in her own way. If she wanted to do housework naked, she would do housework naked.
There's only Kevin Sweeney's word as to what time he left. He says it was around 2 or 10 past and that he arrived home at 4. No one saw him leave. We've timed his journey home to Belgium. He could have been in Steensel when the fire broke out. A burglar alarm which melted in the blaze timed the fire at 2:38 precisely. The fire had smouldered for more than an hour before the fire brigade were called. Firemen found the bed had been completely destroyed, but because the bedroom door and windows were closed, the fire had been confined. In a closet off the main bedroom, they found Suzanne Davis. In the debris by the bed, police found the remains of a cigarette packet and a lighter. Suzanne had managed to get off the burning bed, but had failed to escape. Marks on the carpet showed where she died in a crouching position, desperate for air, suffocated by smoke.
She never, ever smoked upstairs, ever. I was totally convinced that she had not died through an accident. I just knew it. I can't tell you why. I just can't, but I just knew she hadn't.
Belgian police broke the news of his wife's death to Kevin Sweeney that morning. Soon after, Suzanne's brother arrived from England.
He didn't look very emotional. He looked shocked. And then I just kept asking him what happened. Had he been in touch with the police? Had he talked to the police? He hadn't been in touch with anybody. And I asked him why not. I asked him, you know, let's go and see Suzanne and see her in, you know, and identify her and see the police and see what happened and where. I asked him when he left Steensel on 3 or 4 separate occasions, and he just couldn't give me an answer to that question.
And then, when he didn't stay for the funeral, I don't think I've ever been so angry in all my life that he could do that to my daughter. And I had asked him to sign a card to put on the roses he'd asked me to buy, and he said I wouldn't know what to say. And he'd asked me to write the card, and that really distressed me.
Dutch police were already convinced this was a case of arson and murder. What they'd found at the scene of the fire was deeply suspicious. The bedroom where Suzanne Davis had died reeked of turpentine. There was turpentine all over the carpet. Around the room and nearby were the remains of at least 5 large bottles of turpentine and white spirit. One bottle was found intact in the bathroom, surrounded by toilet rolls. 2 plastic bottles had melted in the fire. 2 more were intact, one inside the bedroom, the other outside on the landing. Had the blazing bed not been snuffed out through lack of oxygen, the house could easily have burnt to the ground. Interviewed on Dutch television, Kevin Sweeney insisted he had nothing to do with it.
No,
Nothing at all.
nothing at all.
You didn't kill her.
No, I did not.
If you didn't do it, is there somebody else to blame for it?
I don't think so. I believe it was an accident. I believe the evidence shows that it was an accident.
However, Kevin Sweeney was charged with murder, arson and mortgage fraud on the Steensel house. But when he came to trial last year, the prosecution failed to establish a clear motive for the killing.
De rechtbank verklaart niet bewezen hetgeen verdachte onder 1 en 2...
The defense attacked the thoroughness of Dutch forensic reports, which they said didn't prove the fire had been anything other than an accident. Sweeney was acquitted. The prosecution immediately appealed for a retrial.
They should have done more forensic tests. We want to know why there were so many bottles upstairs. You know, any normal household has 1 bottle of cleaning fluid, not 5. And it was a very dangerous circular staircase. She'd have had to carry them up in 2 lots. Nobody's going to do that. Oh, there are so many questions that could have been answered, and we feel they've not been asked, and we would like them answered.
And I am appalled and saddened at the way the first trial went, and I have severe doubts about what will happen in the second trial.
In part 2, the result of our forensic tests. Tests that dramatically stopped the second Dutch trial and leave Sweeney with yet more questions to answer. Mr. Sweeney, Roger Cook, Central Television. Kevin Sweeney likes to remain a man of mystery. He makes it difficult for anyone to track him down and to bring together the pieces of his life. But as our investigation revealed, he's haunted by tragic death. In 1987, he married Beverly Flint, a young art school graduate who he'd employed as a girl Friday. The couple moved with their 2 children to Boesval, south of Brussels. They bought a Belgian pop star's mansion. The house was put in Beverly's name with a £250,000 mortgage covered by an insurance policy on her life. August bank holiday, 1993. Beverly Flint's parents travelled to Belgium to see their daughter. Beverly was 13 weeks pregnant and she'd just had a routine medical checkup.
We took the children out to the park and went to an ice cream parlour, and she was perfectly normal. You know, there was no sign of anything was wrong with her at all.
Beverly had been diagnosed with a heart murmur as a child, but this never developed into anything serious as an adult. Her Belgian GP has told us that when he saw her 3 days before her death, there were none of the usual warning signs of impending heart failure.
Beverly just said, I'm going outside to feed the cats now, Mum. And I said, fine, and I started to clear the table. That was the last we saw of her. Apparently, you know, she sort of collapsed in the garden, and Sweeney came to the door and said, quick, Beverly's fainted. Quick, David, Beverly's fainted, and David went running out. I actually didn't see her anymore after that.
Well, when I got out there, Beverly was lying on the floor, and I said, got to get air into her because she was unnaturally still. From the moment I went out there, she was dead.
There is no evidence to connect Sweeney with Beverly's death. But within 4 days, Sweeney had had her cremated. there was no post-mortem. Her death will always remain a mystery. Beverly Flint's ashes are buried here in the village cemetery in Boorsval. Hers was a small funeral. Her husband, Kevin Sweeney, was not amongst the mourners. This tiny gravestone, tucked away in a corner, is all there is to mark Beverly's passing. Beverly Flint's will is a brief document. It left everything in trust to the children, but with Kevin Sweeney in total control. But what baffled her family was the date on which the will appeared to have been signed, the 29th of September 1991, just after she'd given birth to her second child.
She stayed with us a full 2 weeks, and I realised then that the 29th of September she was actually still staying with us, and she hadn't been outside the house. She didn't actually leave our house to go home in a chauffeur-driven Daimler until the 4th of October.
How could you be so sure?
Well, Beverly had always kept baby books, and in her baby book she had written my first travels, and it says, "I travelled home with Mummy in a Daimler on the 4th of October."
Sweeney needed a false witness, someone who'd say they'd seen Beverly sign her own will. Weeks after Beverly's death, 2 years after she apparently signed, Sweeney targeted their trusted friend, Christina Innes. He persuaded her that if she didn't sign the will, the children would get nothing.
And he said that she had meant for me to witness it, but that she hadn't got around to asking me. And would I witness it now? Because otherwise all the money would go to the Belgian government because of punitive taxes, and that the children wouldn't be able to inherit her estate. And so I signed it, but she was already dead.
Beverly Flint's children have still received nothing from their mother's will. 2 months after Beverly's death, Sweeney took a new lover, an Australian student backpacking round Europe. Chris Rowley had taken a job as the Sweeney family's temporary nanny.
It was a fairy tale. It was this man who was charming, saying that he loved me unconditionally and wanted to marry me. And I thought, at the time I believed him.
Surely you must have thought something was a bit odd when he began to push you to get insured. Tell me about that.
I remember one day we were lying down on a couch in the TV room, and he mentioned to me that, you know, me being his partner, if one of us died, what about the children? And sort of mentioned offhandedly, we'll have to get insurance out. And he was 20 years older than me. And I remember saying, like, excuse me, you're going to die way before me, I just won't die.
Chris Rowley didn't die, but she had to go. Kevin Sweeney got rid of her by saying he was dying from a terminal brain tumour. In reality, he'd already advertised in a Lonely Hearts column and was sifting through the 48 replies.
Hello.
Kevin Sweeney chose Suzanne Davis, here with her family at Christmas just before they met. Suzanne had 2 failed marriages behind her and wanted to find true love.
Your doggy.
I think he selected her from all the applicants that answered his advert in Private Eye. I have no doubt in my mind that Suzanne was selected because of her vulnerability.
In November 1994, Kevin Sweeney and Suzanne Davies were married in Miami. 9 months later, she was dead. In the months before the fatal fire, Suzanne Davies became a wealthy woman. She took out additional life insurance, worth £300,000 in all. She bought 2 new houses, both of them with big mortgages, covered by endowment policies on her life.
And that really served to increase our feelings of concern even more, because suddenly here was our daughter, worth an awful lot of money, dead.
At Kevin Sweeney's first trial, the prosecution failed to establish money as the motive for murder. Sweeney told the court that only his children stood to benefit financially from the death of his wife, and that he wouldn't get a penny of the £635,000 she'd left in her will. But our investigation shows that, in fact, Sweeney stood to gain a fortune on Suzanne's death.
If no questions had been asked, the £300,000 of the 2 endowment policies would have passed to Mr. Sweeney under the terms of her will, and the life insurance policies would have passed to him as sole trustee, and he would have had control of them.
Mr. Sweeney, Roger Cook, Central Television. Would you like to explain to us why, having agreed an interview in your own solicitor's office, you didn't bother to turn up?
No, I did speak to Mr. Scott, as you know. And
I want to know why you didn't turn up. Could it be, perhaps, that you would be in some difficulty with the evidence that is not going to be heard in a Dutch court? Like Beverly's mysterious death and the forged will, like the fraudulent mortgages, like the new forensic evidence, which confirms that the Steensel fire was arson, and even by your own timings that you were there, and probably there, while it started.
No, that's entirely wrong. I was not there.
By your own timings, you could easily have been there. The fire had started at some time before 2:38, when the burglar alarm melted.
No, that is not true. The burglar alarm did not melt.
The burglar alarm did melt. The people who actually installed it told us it did.
Yes, it
now, you're a
melted.
pathological liar by all accounts. Anybody who's dealt with you over a period of time says that's exactly what you are. So when you say that's not true, do you know what the truth is?
Yes, I do know what the truth is. The evidence in the case is very, very simple and straightforward.
Dutch police had called in forensic experts from Scotland Yard. What they discovered destroyed any notion that Suzanne died in a tragic accident. Yet, astonishingly, their findings that there'd been a second fire outside the bedroom door were disregarded by the Dutch court.
That forensic report, which was produced out of nowhere, the Dutch
It was
government...
produced by an authority used by Scotland Yard.
And that report is entirely wrong. And the proof of that
Are you
is...
the only man in step? Is everybody else on Earth out of step with you, Mr. Sweeney?
No, but I have forensic evidence that shows that to be the case.
Kevin Sweeney is either wrong or he's lying. We put Scotland Yard's arson theory to the test. The science is simple. Heat rises. Our experiment shows that a bed fire, like the one that killed Suzanne, would burn through the top of the bedroom door. What this test confirmed is that further down the outside of the door, there were no flames, no scorch marks, no burnt carpet. This is Suzanne's door, intensely burned at the bottom. Only a second fire, lit outside the bedroom, could have caused it. Scotland Yard's report concluded that Suzanne Davis died as a result of arson. When Sweeney came to court yesterday, he hoped he'd be free within minutes, but he had a real shock coming. Our new evidence means the whole case is now to be re-investigated. Sweeney's disappointment was obvious to the waiting press.
What was Scotland Yard doing getting involved in an investigation in a provincial Dutch town?
Two British women are dead, Mr. Sweeney. Did you feel grief when your 2 wives died?
Yes, of course I felt grief. Okay, shall we go?
There was a fire on the landing outside. Well, how did a fire start on the landing? We want to know. We really do.